So, illustrating this argument, Hardin asks us to imagine we're on the ocean and our boat crashes, and some people are on a lifeboat and some people are in the water. And the lifeboat is not big enough for everybody, sad to say. So the metaphor is pretty easy to understand here. The lifeboat represents people in developed societies, and the ocean represents people in developing countries. Right, so let's say there's 50 people in a lifeboat. The lifeboat's designed to fit 60 people, and there's 100 people in the water. Now, Hardin says, what's the ethical decision to make in this case? Okay, let's consider some possible options. We could choose 10 people randomly. You just there's 100 people in the water screaming. You know, pick one in every 10 people. You're just like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, you live. The rest of you die. Okay, and then do it again, 10 times, right? And so you'll save people, 10, and 90 people still die. And the basis of which you chose the 10 people was completely arbitrary. You know, you have no solid reason for preferring them over the other 90 people, right? Doesn't seem very ethical. We could take all the 100 people, we could try, the lifeboat will sink, everybody dies. Doesn't seem very ethical. Okay, we could all sacrifice ourselves. You could think, oh, well, I'm a selfless person, I care about the world. I'll kill myself so that somebody else can live, right? I'll jump into the ocean, somebody can take my place, right? The result of that, even if all of the 50 people on the boat kill themselves, okay, that will only save 50 people. There's still only space for 60 on the lifeboat. There's still 100 people in the water. That means 140 people in the water are going to die, including, and then an additional 50 people are going to die, the people who voluntarily jumped in. All right, so even trying to save yourself is not ethical because it doesn't save everybody. All right, so therefore, under none of these circumstances do we resolve the problem. And then Hardin says the only ethical solution is to not let anybody on the lifeboat. So for those people who are already saved, to not allow anybody else onto the boat. Right? And then he extends this metaphor to relations between developed and developing countries in general. He says, well, firstly, the lifeboat example is a limited example. There's no population growth here. Right? The 50 people on the boat are just 50 people. They're always 50 people. They're not having more children. People in the ocean are certainly not having more children. They're going to drown before that can possibly occur. You know, imagine the mechanics of it. So if we consider the actual world, the population of the developed world doubles every 87 years, roughly, based on current population projections. And the population of the developing world doubles every 35 years. Yeah, it's a little terrifying. And if you're from the Philippines or Pakistan or a country like that with exceptionally high population growth, probably doubles every 20 years. Right? The whole size of the country doubles every 20 years. Right? And for Hardin, this is even more reason why the people on the lifeboat can't save everybody, because population is growing, right? If anything, that means there's even less space than before. So Hardin's using this example to make a bunch of controversial arguments. Firstly, he's opposing migration from the developing world to the developed world. He says that, you know, this space argument, this argument there's not enough space for everybody, there's not enough resources for everybody, is a justification to stop migration from the developing to the developed world, particularly as a solution to stuff like poverty. Right? Secondly, he opposes any form of food or medical aid to the developing world. Literally, his argument is, we should just let other countries' populations decline. You know, if they have a hunger problem, let people starve until they die. If there's a disease problem, let them have the disease until they die or find a way to solve it. Right? In other words, the fact that aid exists continues to sustain these problems. And it's only because we give aid that problems like that happen in developing countries continue to exist. Right? His solution to that is if we just let those problems happen, eventually they'll find a way to regulate those problems. That aid doesn't make anything better, it just keeps the problem going. Right? So, unlike Leopold and Nace, Hardin is not an ecologist. The reason why, if we look at his argument, it's completely based on what's good for human beings, right? And actually a subset of human beings. He's really just worried about people in developed countries, right? So it's a very anthropocentric argument. Leopold and Nace are arguing that humanity isn't special. We're just a part of nature, a small part even, you know, that we're not the center of the world. Hardin's whole theory revolves around what's good for people, how much space is left for me, or my society, or the rest of the people, or that sort of thing. So we've looked at some of the key environmentalist and ecologist arguments. We can also look at the ways that ecologism has been critiqued. So firstly, do ecologists give us a reason to value nature? Now, the central claim of ecologism is that the natural world is independently valuable irrespective of whether it's useful for humans or not. Now, one problem with this is that to say that something has value is in itself a value judgment. And if we look at other species, quite frankly, you don't see many birds, dogs, or cats making philosophical discussions about the value of stuff, right? Even the value of themselves or the value of nature. Humanism as a philosophy exists. In other words, we say humans are valuable. Catism does not yet exist. I hope it never exists. So ecologists can't give us a reason why we should say the natural world is better than the created world. In other words, better than the human world, human society, and culture. It's more or less a take it or leave it argument. Either you already believe that nature is intrinsically valuable, and if so, they don't convince you, right? Because you already believed it. Or you don't believe it, and nothing that they're going to say is going to convince you, because it's a different belief than what you hold. Right? So this claim that the human world and the natural world are separate is a second big problem. Because lots of people place a lot of emphasis on the created world, on cultures and traditions, or the society that you're part of, or the nation that you're part of, or things like that, right? So how can ecologists value something like culture or tradition, or even human life, while maintaining a position that the natural world has intrinsic value, but human society and culture does not? That's something you can just change according to what's good for the environment, right? So the next is that, are ecologists hostile to this concept of individual rights? The Economist read an article recently that said liberalism is the most successful idea of the last 200 years, right? That was their claim, right? And even if you disagree with the claim, right, it's very difficult to dispute the big impact that liberalism has had, and the fact that individual rights is now a widespread belief. So if you really do follow a belief system that says individual rights don't exist or don't matter, how successful are you going to be in convincing people towards your ideology? Probably not very successful. Right, so next is this claim that says if we look at the world, if we look at environment, the environment can teach us how to be. I studied deep ecology in university when I was the same age as you, and we had this American professor, and she was like, well, I became a deep ecologist because one day I stayed in nature and I looked at the ants, and the ants all worked together, and there was no everybody did the same work, and they didn't take more things from the environment than they needed. And I thought, wow, that teaches me about how we as humans should be, right? Never take more from the world than what we need, and always just use what we need, and don't take more, and don't try and become a consumer society. Just eat as much as we need, and that's it. Now, drawing this conclusion is not very valid for the following reasons, right? I've listed 4 different types of animals on the board. We've got lions, hyenas, koalas, and dolphins. And the problem is, if we look at nature, nature doesn't give us a consistent message of how to behave, right? We could copy any of these species if we want, and get a different result. If we copy the lion, we'd be individualist and aggressive, right? We'd walk around the world killing and eating things. We wouldn't have many friends. Maybe we'd have a couple of lionesses to entertain us or do the hunting for us. That's about it. Right? If we're a hyena, we're a collectivist but aggressive species. Right? We have a much bigger society. Hyenas travel in much bigger packs, as the picture shows. If we're a koala, Australia is probably the most famous animal. Hyper-individualist, koalas even hate other koalas. Right? They don't like coexisting together. But very placid, they don't kill things, they eat leaves and that's it. They don't even drink water. They get all of their water from the leaves that they eat. Okay? So, they don't have a very big impact on the world. Or we could be like a dolphin, like collectivist and not very aggressive. Okay? So we could be any of these things. But these things are all different from each other. Nature, therefore, doesn't teach us how we should behave. Nature's teaching us a whole heap of different things, right? As soon as you say, well, I'm going to prefer the ant, because I think that's the best way to live, really all you're doing is transposing, you're taking your values and picking the species you like the most and saying everybody should be like that, right? There is nothing inherent about nature that teaches you how to behave. So nature is as much competitive as it is cooperative, and therefore gives us no clues about how we should organize our society. That's one possible criticism. Next, can ecologists support value pluralism? So one big criticism of ecologism is that it's great if you already believe it, but if you don't believe it, it's really hard to convince somebody to become an ecologist. All right? Specifically, if you're a member of a major religion like Christianity, Judaism, or Islam, a fundamental part of that religion's teaching is that the universe itself was made for human consumption. Right? It's like a very basic fact about what these religions say about the world. Right? So, in other words, if you're an ecologist, what you're really saying is, okay, you need to choose. I'm saying nature is intrinsically valuable. Your God is saying, no, it's not. Please choose right now. You know, and what do you think most people are going to choose? They're going to choose their deeply ingrained religious belief over what you're telling them. Right? This is perhaps one reason why ecologism is not all that persuasive. You know, it's not very good at changing people's mind because it's asking people to confront their deepest held values, you know, the things that they've been taught for a very long time. So to summarize today's talk, ecologism is an ideology that says, firstly, the world is interconnected, and secondly, it critiques humanity's impact on the world and the impact of industrial society on the world, where we take things out of the ecology, out of the environment, and don't put anything back. You know, we're constantly exploiting this system. Right, so this idea of a human society based on continuous growth, whether it's population growth or industrial growth or economic growth, is seen as a negative thing. Right? Ecologists have a problem with continuous growth. Environmentalism and ecologism are different though, because environmentalism is a concern for the environment based on what's good for human beings. And it's kind of the takeaway, is that if you forget everything else, try and remember this. Environmentalists value the environment because it helps human beings. Ecologists value the environment because of intrinsic value, so that it doesn't matter whether it helps human beings or not. Right? The environment just is, and it should be respected for what it is. Right? It has an intrinsic value. Okay, so that's it for environmentalism and ecologism. So